Welcome to Keeping It Real with Phil. Second video here, and wanted to do something on tackle management, but got a few comments and some messages about my patterns that I had at Lake Eufaula in Oklahoma that propelled me to the All-American in 2024 and in a regional there that I had. And I was going to do something on, like I say, tackle management, but we're going to go ahead and dive into one of the patterns that I had. But before we do that, just wanted to say that this time of year, around the holidays, there's a lot of opportunities for fishermen to give back to the community. And one particular on your lake may be one that you can provide toys for underprivileged children. And we actually have one of those tournaments coming up this coming weekend on Rayburn. Sam Rayburn, y'all know him, East Texas fisherman, and it's something that me and Diana are going to do, my life partner, my fishing partner, and we're going to go out and provide toys for children and at the same time do what we love to do, which is to fish. And it's going to be a fun time, whether we catch them or not. It's a dive into one of the patterns, little deals. I called it, had a couple of deals on Lake Eufaula, and I knew what times of day that I could run those couple of deals. And one of them was wacky worm fishing. It was skipping wacky worms underneath docks, and it had to be specific docks. And these specific docks had a shoreline grass or shoreline weed, an emergent weed that was close to the docks. And it was actually a pattern. I don't know if the winner of the regional, and this was Region 1. It was the Cowboy Division, the Missouri Division, the Mississippi Division, and there was one other division that was there. I think it was the Wacky Division. So there's basically 8 regionals with 4 states in each regional. And you have to be the top 45 to qualify. And so out of that, each region, the top 45 from each division, there's 4 divisions in a regional, there's about 200, you can say there's about 200 boaters, right? And 200 co-anglers. Of course, I was a boater and made it in the top 6, because it takes the top 6 boaters and the top 6 co-anglers to make it to the All-American. So the Major League Fishing, Bass Fishing League, All-American. And so one of the patterns that I was using was something I've done. I said that I've fished tournaments for 40 years. I've done tournaments and I've guided on Toledo Bend and Sam Rayburn. There was about a 20-year span there that I didn't really fish competitively. I did do some guiding. And that was from about, I guess it was 2003 when my son was born. But you could say 1999 really was my last, it was FLW at the time, was my last BFL, if you want to call it. And then I started back when my son was about to graduate. He was in high school. And it allowed me to get back into competitive fishing. But I did do some guiding. I did do fishing. I always fished. But I just didn't do chase my goal, which was to make the All-American. And so I was able to start back in that in 2019. And I did some co-angling for the first 2 years. And I actually did some marshalling. And I would tell anybody, if you're getting into fishing and you want to learn some new techniques, you want to learn some new ways of doing things, or you're just maybe new into the sport, altogether, marshalling and what was, when I did it, was the FLW Pro Series, and I co-anglered in the Toyota Series, and I think I did a few BFLs. I did, because I made it to the regional as a co-angler. I think that was 2020 or maybe 2019, whatever. It was on Grand Lake, but So, but my goal was always to try to make the All-American once I was able to get back into competitive fishing. So, got back into being a boater, and then made the regional at Grand Lake last year. Had a really good first day, and kind of didn't do so well the second day. But so I did make it third day. But this year I was fortunate enough to get on a couple little deals. And I knew the time of day that I could run those couple of deals, and I made it to fourth place on the last day to make it to the All-American, which is a lifelong goal. And so very excited about that, as I said in my first video. And so I had some comments, some messages from people asking what was the couple little deals. So one of the little deals I'll share with you guys was I was wacky worm fishing, skipping wacky worms up underneath docks, and like I say, it had to be a particular kind of dock that had some emergent grass up around the walkways, and so I was basically skipping wacky worms, or particular wacky worms, up underneath, what I call wacky worms, up underneath the walkways, and even in front, even up underneath, around ladders, around the common things that hold fish on these docks. And it was a time of day deal. So I knew I had another pattern that I was running in the morning up to when the sun got high. I knew I could go to these particular docks, and the fish were going to be set up on these docks. And so I want to just cover wacky worm fishing in general, and I have a lot of experience with wacky worm fishing. And some people say there's, I didn't even know what Neko rigging was, but I knew what wacky worm fishing is, and to me it was the same thing, right? So, I remember back in when I was 16 years old, my dad he had a marina on the south end of Toledo, and we had a guide out there, and this guide my dad hired for my 16th birthday, and I had been bass fishing since I was 7 or 8 years old from the shoreline. My dad was a big crappie fisherman, so every time I went out with him, we were pretty much crappie fishing. And but I was really interested, all while I was a youngster, I was really interested in bass. So when he would go, we would come in after the morning of crappie fishing. I was 11, 12 years old, getting into my dad's 17-foot aluminum boat, and he would let me just take it out as long as I didn't fire up the big motor. I'd just get on the trolling motor and I'd go fishing. And so, while he worked in the garden or whatever he did, and so he knew I was really interested in bass fishing, and that's what I did. And I had a little plain old box with some variety of baits or whatever common at the time, some worms, some little 6-inch, 7-inch ribbon worms, and some top water, some heading, top water baits, some tiny torpedoes, and some rogues, right, and stuff like that I'd read up on or sent in the Bassmaster magazines, and I'd watch Bassmaster on Sundays, and I watched Honey Hole magazine, which was a big Texas program that they had on early in the morning on Sunday mornings. You had to wake up at 5 o'clock to catch it and stuff, and so at a real early age, I was very interested in bass fishing. So my dad hired out for my 16th birthday. My birthday's in March on Toledo Bend. He hired out this guy to guide it out of our marina, and and he took me out fishing. And what he told me the day before we went fishing was, hey, just bring a rod with about 14-pound test line, which at that time we didn't have fluorocarbon. It was all monofilament. And I think I had 14-pound string on there or whatever, and had it on a. He said, bring you a 6, 6 or 7 foot rod that you can throw something light on. And so that's what I did. Met him at the marina the next morning and jumped in his boat with one rod. And he, from there, tied on a straight shank hook. But, at the time, the straight shank hook was a eagle claw, blue, I think they called it a southern sprout mouth, worm hook, and it had barbs on it, and it was about a 4/0 hook, so a big, heavy worm hook, and he bent the barbs down, and we tied it on my line, my 14-pound monofilament line, and then he took a cream purple worm, so the cream purple worm was the first, I guess you'd call it finesse worm, that they really came out with. And, he then hooked the worm, and granted it's a 4/0 eagle claw, straight shank. He bent the barbs down that would otherwise hold your Texas rig worm on. And he put it right there in the egg sac of this cream worm, right? And basically, it was a wacky worm. And when he did that, I thought, oh my God, this guy lost his mind. We ain't gonna catch nothing with that. How in the world are we gonna catch some of that? And then we went out, right? And we went and we found, of course, they had hydrilla, all in the lake on the south end of Toledo Bend at that time. And they had defined inside weed lines, and we'd find sandy banks. And of course, we didn't have polarized glasses really at that time. And so we were looking really hard for white spots or sandy spots. Basically, the fish were on the bed. And anytime he seen a sandy spot, he would say, throw that worm right past it and drop it on that sandy spot. And let me tell you what, it was one of the best birthday presents I had at that time ever. And we smashed them. I'm talking about smashed them. I'm talking about big fish, all kinds of fish. I think, I don't even remember the number, but it was ridiculous, right? And that was like in 1983, right? It was like, nobody said anything about this. This was on Toledo Bend by a guide that he never basically fished professionally. He just guided. And this was the worm that I started wacky worm fishing with. And from there, as my time on the water and my fishing experience, went on, this was a mainstay for me, was the wacky worm. And on the south end, the south end of Toledo, really Toledo in general, we have docks, right? Because it's the Sabine River Authority. You can have docks if you have land. It's not like Rayburn, which is a Corps of Engineer lake, which unless you're a marina and other stipulations, you can't have a dock. Then I learned that at certain times of the year, I could take this, throw this around docks, or throw it up during the spawn on them sandy spots and catch fish. From there, I kind of started developing my own strategy of when and how and rigging the wacky worm. And so, I experiment with a lot of things. When I got into guiding on the lake myself, it was after I got out of college, so you can imagine I was probably, 20 years old, and I started guiding on the lake. I started guiding on Toledo Bend, South End Toledo, and my guide service called South End Guide Service. And I started guiding on South End Toledo Bend to supplement, right, income for my bass fishing. And I also got it on Rayburn and got hooked up with the guide over there, and he would get some corporations that hire him out at the time, And sometimes he would need 4 or 5 different guys to take, each guy would take 2 guys out. I started incorporating the Wacky worm with that because it was real easy for clients to fish, and it caught fish. And so, but the 4-aught Eagle Claw, and this is not a 4-aught Eagle Claw, but I'll show a picture of it. But the 4-aught Eagle Claw that I used at the time, you bought them like in a 10-pack, and at the time, they may only been like $2 or something, but to me that was expensive, especially when you're going to be handing, they're going to be hooking up, right? It wasn't weed us. There's times that we're going to be losing these hooks and the worms, and which at the time I would buy these cream worms, in a 100-pack. So what I started doing was I figured out that if I started using the white perch hooks, the Arbidine hooks that my dad had, right? He'd buy them in a 100-pack, and then I started buying them in a 100-pack, and they were cheap. So you could buy, a 100-pack of Arbidine hooks for, for $2 or $1.50 or whatever it was. And, I started using a 2-aught Arbidine hook. And what I liked about it was if a client got hooked up, on a stump or got hooked up on a dock or something like that, you could easily pull it and kind of straighten it, not necessarily straighten it all the way out, but it would come off. And if they did break off, who cares? I got 100 of them. So it made it real easy for me to supply my clients with hooks, and worms. And but the problem with this hook is it's very light. So it didn't sink very fast. So what I did from there, and I had learned this from my neighbor across the street at Toledo at the time, was I basically took finishing nails, right? And I would cut the head off of it, and I would take the finishing nail and I would put it, into the head of the cream worm. And now, once I did that, and you could cut them different sizes. I think the nails that I use, I still do it because it's cheap. I can buy, 40 of these for, a couple of bucks. And I think this is a 1.5 inch is what I use, finishing nail. And so I could put that finishing nail in the cream worm now, and with the light, white perch hook. And now I had the weight that I could skip under the docks, and I could basically, weight it down where I could cap, so it made it easy to throw in the wind. And also it fell a little different, yes, but it was very cheap, right? To buy the finishing nails, very cheap. To buy the 1-aught or 2-aught Arbidine hooks, and then the cream worms, like I say, you get a 100-pack of them for, at that time, $3 or something like that. So that was in the late 80s, early 90s, that was a staple of mine for guiding. It was a staple of mine for, the Redmans that I fished. And it was a staple of mine in team tournaments too, when I would hook up with my cousin and we would fish team tournaments and bass and bucks and some of the trails that we had here locally. So obviously as time progressed, the Cincos came out, the stick baits came out. And I remember a tournament, and this was like probably in the mid 90s. I was in a Redman tournament. Actually, I don't think it was a Redman tournament. It was actually a Angler's Choice individual tournament. And I ain't gonna say the guy's name, but there was a guy that caught 25 pounds in the bushes on Rayburn, and I was across the cove from him, and so I kind of seen what he was doing because, we talked, and I was doing something kind of similar, except I was flipping a jig, but he was actually flipping a a, a finesse style worm, into the bushes. Cinco's wasn't out at the time, but he was flipping a finesse style worm into the bushes on, at that time, it was like a braided line that nobody even, knew about. I mean, it was when braid first came out. And it was like, fluorescent looking or something. I don't even, it was like the fluorescent stuff we have now. But I mean, he was flipping this wacky worm into the bushes, and you might say, well, how was he doing that? Well, at that time, the weedless hooks that we had was this Gamakatsu hook, and I'll show a picture of it, with the wire guard. And so he was putting that on, and then he was putting a nail in the head of that, or whatever he was putting in the head of it to weight it down, of that trick worm. And and I'm pretty sure it was the Zoom trick worm. They were one of the first ones that came out. It could have been a cream, I'm not sure. So that's what I started going to flip bushes, was this wire guard Gamakatsu. I think this is like a 1/0, but I always use the, or this might be a 2/0, but I always use the bigger one. I use the 4/0. So I would get the big, Gamakatsu weedless hook, because we're on Rayburn in Toledo, and if I was fishing bushes in the springtime and they were very finicky, then I would go with the wacky worm, and I would flip on the edges of the bushes, or sometimes even get kind of into the bushes with it, and that allowed me to get in that heavy cover. And it was amazing what you caught out of that at that time, right? Had some big sacks, with that setup. So, then fast forward years later, and still using them techniques, and Cinco's come out. And of course, by then, a lot of people knew about wacky worm style fishing. And then what I use now, and what I used in Oklahoma to skip docks, was basically this VMC, and this is the 1/0, but I also like the 2/0 VMC weedless hook. It's called the Neko weedless hook by VMC. And I was taking a green pumpkin, X-Zone stick bait, and I'm very peculiar about how I rig my stick bait. You can kind of roll them, and you can kind of see the tendency of them to want to bend, right? To want to fold over. And I like to hook my Cinco on the downside of where that Cinco, or where that X-Zone stick bait, wants to, prefers to go to. So, I can kind of roll it, and I can see that it wants to bend down a certain way, and then I'll go through right beneath the egg sac, and I'll go through the worm with this VMC Neko weedless, which is, whatever. I prefer it over the wire, because you get a lot easier hookups with it. That wire tends to get all messed up after you catch a few fish. And so basically this is what I was using to skip underneath the docks at Lake Eufaula in Oklahoma. And so I would skip it back there if there was a stall, a 2-stall, dock. Then on each stall, it seemed like a lot of fish, were hurling into either 3 places. As I approached the dock, I would throw up there where that emergent grass was, or whatever kind of weed that is they have over there. I would skip up to the edge of it, underneath the walkway. Then I would throw to, if they had a ladder, or the corner of the dock on the deeper part, or maybe it was the corner, coming from the walkway. And then I would skip into the stalls as far back as I could, toward the back of the dock, and then I would work that dock around just like that. And when I work a wacky worm, 90% of the time I'm actually fishing it with a slight slack line. So I'm wanting to make sure, number one, that it gets all the way to the bottom when I'm doing something like that, and then to detect the bite, most of the time you just see the line swimming off, or you might even see a tick on your line. So that's basically one of the patterns that I had on Lake Eufaula in Oklahoma was the wacky worm was skipping in underneath there, and it would start happening after lunch. So, once the sun got up high and the fish got positioned right, you could kind of go in there and catch some smaller fish, before noon. I figured this out during the 3 days I had pre-fishing, but it really wasn't on until, at least for me, and I know it may not have been the case for the guy who won it, and I don't even know what he was using, but I know he was fishing the same type of docks I was because I've seen him a couple of times, but, it didn't really happen for me in the morning, so I had another pattern I was doing, and maybe we'll talk about that one day. But yeah, and as far as live scope goes, I'm kind of weird about using live scope when I'm up tight to cover and into the things that are 10 foot or less. So, I never would turn my live scope on when I would go in these pockets and areas where, basically I had these docks located that had fish around them. So, but, some of the colors that, some of the ways I like to fish wacky worms, and when do I determine whether to fish a finesse style, X-Zone, and I think it's called the deception worm, when do I choose to fish it? Versus, when I choose to fish the, the X-Zone stick bait, whether it's the 5-inch or it's the 6-inch, it all really has to do with what I'm wanting to, well, actually the how finicky the fish are, are they on the bottom? Or are they kind of suspended? Like, for instance, as the tournament went on there, I was basically throwing with no weight, right, with no nail in the head, and I was just using which I like. This is one of the reasons I like these X-Zone stick baits. They do have salt. They are kind of heavy, but yet they have a tendency to float really well too. So if you did put a nail in the head, that tail wants to float up. And but when I was, and it's a lot easier to skip without a nail in the head. So when I first found that pattern, I was skipping without a nail in the head, and these fish were more suspended up on the docks. But it was weird. We had a little kind of front come in, we had some rain come in, we had some hard winds come in, and it changed things on them docks a little bit, where them fish, instead of staying up there close to the bottom of the dock, suspended kind of, they more or less kind of went down to the bottom for me. So that's when I went ahead, and actually I changed up from the green pumpkin, and I don't know why the color changed, but I went to and actually one of my co-anglers put on and on a shaky head put on one of the X-Zone watermelon candies, and he got bit with it, and I was kind of slowing down on getting bit with my program, and so I went ahead and put a nail in the head, and then put it on the BMC hook, and I started getting bitten again. So sometimes it's just a little subtle change, so I need, in the last couple of days, I needed that weight to get down there to the bottom, because for whatever reason the fish decided they didn't want to be suspended as much, and they went down to the bottom. So, weather conditions, pressure, it could have been a number of things that caused them to go down to the bottom. And another key was, in these areas, was all these areas had that emergent grass up on the the shoreline, and there was a lot of bait fish in those pockets. So that's the little deal that I was talking about, and you know, I just wanted to share that with you guys, and some tips on wacky worm fishing. Trying to reach out to some novice fishermen out there and just teach them another way of another technique to fish, and maybe some of you more experienced anglers who use wacky worms and echo rigs and stuff like that. Maybe I gave you a tip or two to help you whenever you come to a situation where the wacky worm or the Neko rig is going to be the best bait for your choice of you know, of capitalizing on fish. And so, you know, happy that y'all have joined me. Hope I gave you some tips. Have a happy Thanksgiving. Don't know if I'll get another video before then. Got a lot of things going on. We got the benefit tournament that we're going to fish this weekend at Rayburn. Hopefully we do well. If not, hey, you know, we hopefully provided for some kids with some toys, and that's the most important thing. So God bless. Hope to see you next time. Hope you rejoin me. Please subscribe so that you can see and get a notification on my next video. Thank you.